Who told you to dress this provocative? The possessive Korean Mafia boss snapped at his secretary. Amelia Martinez stood frozen in the gleaming glass corridor of Taeyong Industries' 47th floor, her hand instinctively smoothing the fabric of her perfectly professional black pencil skirt. 26 years old, 3 months in Seoul, and finally landing the high-paying executive assistant role that would change everything. But when Lee Tae-jin emerged from his corner office at precisely 9 o'clock a.m., impeccably tailored in charcoal Ermenegildo Zegna, his sharp Korean features radiating cold authority, his dark eyes swept over her with dangerous possession, and every rehearsed Korean greeting evaporated from her mind. If you want to see how this Mexican-American woman survives the brutal world of a Korean crime lord who's obsessed with controlling every inch of her life, then stay until the very end of this story. You won't believe what happens when she refuses to submit. Like and subscribe so you never miss these intense mafia stories. The Seoul morning sun cut through my cramped Mapo-gu apartment window as I smoothed down my black pencil skirt for the 4th time. 26 years old, 3 months in Korea, and I was finally starting the position that would change everything. Executive assistant at Taeyong Industries. The name carried weight in Seoul that I didn't fully understand yet, the kind that made my Korean language exchange partner go quiet when I mentioned it. I checked my reflection one last time. Cream silk blouse buttoned conservatively, skirt hitting just above the knee, dark hair swept into a professional low bun. Professional, appropriate, ready. The fluorescent lights of Taeyong Industries' 42nd floor cast everything in cold precision. Amelia Martinez smoothed her blazer for the 3rd time, her reflection in the elevator doors showing a 26-year-old woman trying desperately to look like she belonged. 3 months in Seoul had taught her enough Korean to navigate subway lines and order food, but corporate formality was different territory entirely. The doors opened to reveal a world of glass partitions and hushed efficiency. Every person moved with purpose, their bows calibrated to exact degrees depending on rank. Amelia had practiced bowing in her apartment until her back ached, but theory dissolved when Min-ji, the secretary, appeared with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Martinez S.E., welcome. Please, this way to Sejungnim's office. The corner office seemed to expand as Amelia entered, Seoul's skyline sprawling beyond floor-to-ceiling windows. Lee Tae-jin stood with his back to her, hands clasped behind him, shoulders rigid beneath a perfectly tailored suit. When he turned, his face revealed nothing. Sharp angles, dark eyes that assessed her with the same cold calculation she'd seen Korean businessmen use on subway advertisements. Miss Martinez. His English was flawless, accent barely perceptible. Your resume is impressive. UCLA Business School, 2 years at Goldman Sachs. He paused, gaze dropping to her outfit. But this is Korea. Professional standards are different here. Heat crept up Amelia's neck. Her black pants and cream blouse had seemed conservative enough. Tomorrow, wear a skirt, modest length. Understand corporate image. She nodded, throat tight, wondering if she should bow. Before she could decide, he dismissed her with a slight gesture. Outside, Min-ji materialized beside her. I'll show you your desk. As they walked, she added quietly, Sejongnim is complicated. His world follows different rules. Her voice dropped further. And foreign women before you. It ended badly. The warning hung in the air like smoke. That evening, a package arrived at Amelia's apartment. Inside, a charcoal pencil skirt, designer label, her exact size, with a note in precise handwriting. Professional standards. LTJ. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Call me Tae-jin when we're alone. The text was different from his earlier formal messages. More direct, intimate. The Korean honorifics he'd used all day had vanished, replaced by something that felt dangerous in its familiarity. Amelia stared at the skirt spread across her bed. Wearing it tomorrow meant accepting more than professional guidance. It meant stepping into whatever game Lee Tae-jin was playing. She hung it in her closet anyway. The conference room at Lee Corp's headquarters sat 40 floors above Seoul, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the city like a painting of power. Amelia stood against the back wall, iPad ready, as Lee Tae-jin conducted business with 3 older men in impeccable suits. His Korean flowed like water over stone, smooth, relentless, unstoppable. She didn't need translation to understand the shift in the room's temperature when he leaned forward, fingers steepled, voice dropping to something that made the eldest man's jaw tighten. "What did you tell them?" Amelia asked later as they rode the elevator down. "That patience has limits. That loyalty should be rewarded before it becomes flexible." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "In Korea, we don't threaten directly. We remind people of what they have to lose." The charity gala at the Grand Hyatt that evening stripped away any remaining illusions about her position. Crystal chandeliers cast diamond shadows across Seoul's elite, and Amelia felt every gaze track her movement through the crowd, the foreign woman at Lee Tae-jin's side. Then she appeared. Seo Yoon-hee moved like she owned the marble floors. Designer hanbok modernized into something between tradition and power. Her smile was perfect, her English flawless, her message crystal clear. "You must be the American assistant everyone's discussing." Yoon-hee's hand touched Tae-jin's sleeve with practiced familiarity. "How fascinating that you've lasted 3 months. Most foreign hires don't adapt to our cultural expectations." Before Amelia could respond, an older man approached, Park Jin-woo, whose family name carried weight that made even Tae-jin straighten slightly. His Korean was too rapid for Amelia to follow, but she caught "Wegugin," foreigner, repeated like a diagnosis. Tae-jin's response was measured, formal, his body language shifting into something more deferential than she'd ever seen. Whatever was said, Park Jin-woo's eyes found Amelia with the warmth of a winter wind. The traditional dance started shortly after, a cultural performance that somehow became their first real touch. Tae-jin's hand at her waist, guiding her through movements she didn't know, his breath against her ear as he murmured instructions in English, then Korean, then something between. For 3 minutes, the formality cracked. His fingers pressed against her spine with something beyond professional guidance. Her hand in his felt less like business and more like falling. Then the music ended. The crowd applauded. The distance returned. Outside, as they waited for his car, Tae-jin spoke without looking at her. First in Korean, words that sounded like breaking. Then in English. "People I protect become targets. Foreign women especially." His jaw tightened. "The Park family doesn't forget slights. And you, Amelia Hayes, are becoming a very visible slight to their plans." The weekend shattered any remaining illusions. Lee Tae-jin's black Mercedes glided through Gangnam's neon-soaked streets, past luxury boutiques and clubs where Seoul's elite danced oblivious to the violence brewing below. Amelia sat rigid in the back seat, her laptop forgotten as they pulled into an alley behind a high-rise. A man knelt on the pavement, blood trickling from his mouth. Lee Tae-jin stepped out with terrifying calm, speaking rapid Korean that made the man's face go white. The judgment was swift, 3 fingers broken with methodical precision. Amelia's stomach churned, but she forced herself to watch. This was the truth beneath the expensive suits. In Itaewon, the cultural melting pot of Seoul, they collected protection money from bar owners who bowed deeply and handed over thick envelopes. Lee Tae-jin explained it matter-of-factly. "In Korea, we protect family honor above all. These territories have been ours for 3 generations. My grandfather bled for these streets. To abandon them would dishonor his sacrifice. His voice softened only once when he mentioned Jiwon, the last American who worked for me. Beautiful woman, sharp mind like yours. She thought she could leverage my secrets for a better deal with a rival clan. He paused outside a nightclub, neon reflecting in his dark eyes. They found pieces of her in the Han River. I couldn't save her, even though He didn't finish. The ambush came without warning. Gunfire erupted as they left a restaurant. Rival gang members from Busan, Lee Tae-jin spat. Territorial warfare coded in regional dialects. His associate collapsed, arterial blood pumping from his thigh. Amelia's Los Angeles EMT training kicked in before thought could stop her. She ripped her scarf into a tourniquet, hands steady despite the chaos, applying pressure while Lee Tae-jin's men returned fire. They ended up at her cramped studio apartment in Mapo-gu, too dangerous to go to a hospital. The injured man stabilized on her floor while Lee Tae-jin stood by her tiny window, still gripping his gun. When he finally looked at her, something shifted in his expression, vulnerability bleeding through the armor. He crossed the small space in 2 steps, cupping her face with hands still smelling of gunpowder. Instead of her lips, he pressed his forehead to hers, a gesture far more intimate in Korean culture than any kiss. The contact seared through her exhaustion. "You shouldn't have seen this," he whispered in Korean, his breath warm against her skin. "You should run back to America before you end up like Jiwon." But his hands held her face like she was something precious, something he couldn't bear to lose. Amelia's heart hammered against her ribs. She should run? Every rational cell in her brain screamed it. But she stayed. The hospital insisted she stay 3 days. Amelia lasted 2 before discharging herself against medical advice and returning to Lee Tae-jin's office with a fresh bandage hidden beneath her sleeve. His fury lasted exactly 7 seconds before something shifted in his expression. Recognition, perhaps, of a loyalty that transcended employment contracts and cultural expectations. "In Korea," he said quietly, "we have a word, jong. It means connection beyond reason." She understood without translation. The integration happened gradually, then suddenly. Amelia found herself in boardroom meetings where she was the only woman, the only foreigner, learning to read the subtle hierarchies in how men poured each other's drinks, in who spoke first, in the weight of silence. Lee Tae-jin's executives watched her with calculating eyes, measuring whether she understood the game. Seo Yun-hee understood perfectly. Her attacks grew more sophisticated, weaponizing propriety itself. Anonymous tips to business journals about the inappropriate foreign assistant with unprecedented access. Carefully orchestrated social media whispers questioning Lee Tae-jin's judgment. Each strike wrapped in concern for traditional values and corporate reputation. The dinner invitation arrived on ivory paper with his personal seal, not the office. His private residence in Hanam-dong, where Korea's elite lived behind walls and discretion. The penthouse overlooked the Han River, floor-to-ceiling windows framing Seoul's glittering sprawl. But Amelia noticed the traditional touches, calligraphy scrolls, a tea ceremony set, ancestral tablets in an alcove. East and West negotiated in architecture and decor. "My mother commissioned those," Lee Tae-jin said, following her gaze to the scrolls. "She believes a man who forgets his roots becomes dangerous." They ate japchae and bulgogi he'd ordered from his mother's favorite restaurant, drinking soju that burned less than the confession building between them. He told her about the pressure of inherited empire, the suffocation of expectations. She told him about scholarships and student loans, about choosing Seoul because America felt too small for her ambitions. "You don't belong here," he said finally, and her heart cracked until he continued. "You belong everywhere. That's what terrifies me." The kiss tasted like soju and inevitability. The boundary they crossed felt less like transgression and more like coming home to a place neither had known existed. In the darkness of his bedroom, cultural differences dissolved into something elemental. Afterward, tangled in Egyptian cotton sheets, he traced the bruise on her arm. "You've ruined me for Korean women," he whispered. "For anyone who isn't you." "You've ruined me for America," she answered. "For anywhere that isn't here with you." For 3 weeks, they existed in stolen moments and careful secrecy. Partnership bloomed alongside passion, her insight shaping his decisions, his world expanding through her perspective. Then the summons arrived. Formal, unyielding. Mrs. Lee requests the honor of Miss Parker's presence for tea. Lee Tae-jin's face went pale. "My mother doesn't request, she commands." The impossible divide they'd crossed was about to demand its reckoning. The parking garage was nearly empty when the black van pulled alongside Amelia's car. She had just finished her shift at the hospital, exhausted from a 14-hour day that had left her mind foggy and her reflexes slow. The men who emerged moved with practiced efficiency. No wasted motion, no hesitation, no chance for her to scream before a hand clamped over her mouth and another arm locked around her waist. Her medical bag hit the concrete with a hollow thud. The van door slid shut with a finality that made her stomach drop. When she woke, the world had contracted to 4 concrete walls and a single fluorescent light that buzzed with maddening persistence. The underground facility somewhere in industrial Gangnam had no windows, no sense of time, no connection to anything familiar. Her head throbbed where they'd injected something to keep her docile during transport. The zip ties on her wrists had already rubbed her skin raw. The interrogation started within hours. Park Sung-min himself came first, his expensive suit incongruous in the bare room. He didn't touch her. He didn't need to. His questions came wrapped in threats that exploited every vulnerability of her foreign status: visa cancellation, deportation, public shaming across every media outlet in Seoul. Her face plastered across news sites with headlines about the foreign woman who'd tried to trap Korea's most eligible bachelor. "You think you understand our culture," he said in perfect English, his voice clinical. "But you're just a foreign whore contaminating Lee family honor. You have no idea what you've involved yourself in." When she refused to sign the papers denouncing Tae-jin and accepting a payoff, the cultural psychological torture escalated. They brought in other interrogators who spoke only Korean, forcing her to struggle through conversations that left her disoriented and doubting her own comprehension. They played recordings of Korean news segments speculating about her relationship with Tae-jin, commentators discussing her inappropriateness with casual cruelty. They threatened to contact her family, to destroy her career, to ensure she'd never work in medicine again. The physical violence came in calculated increments, a slap here, rough handling there, nothing that would leave permanent marks, but everything designed to break her spirit. Still, she refused to betray him. The most disturbing moment came when Seo Yoon-hee appeared in the doorway. The woman who'd once seemed interested in Tae-jin now stood between captor and prisoner, her expression unreadable. Was this cultural betrayal? Another Korean woman reminding Amelia of her permanent outsider status? Or something more complicated, a protection masked as participation? Hours bled into days in the timeless underground space. Amelia lost track of meals, of sleep cycles, of whether it was day or night in the world above. The cultural isolation was almost worse than the physical confinement. Here, stripped of context and support, she questioned everything. Her understanding of Tae-jin's feelings, her place in his world, whether love could possibly bridge the chasm of everything that separated them. But she didn't break. She wouldn't. The call came at 4 a.m., delivered in the formal Korean that made Lee Tae-jin's blood run cold. Park Sung-ho's voice was measured, almost polite, as he named his price for Amelia's safe return. The ransom wasn't the insult. The presumption that Lee Tae-jin would negotiate was. He ended the call after 7 seconds, his hand steady as he set down the phone, his expression revealing nothing of the violence building behind his eyes. Within the hour, 40 men assembled in the underground garage of his headquarters. No discussion, no hesitation. Every man understood what crossing territorial boundaries meant. Open war with the Park family, generations of careful peace shattered in a single night. Lee Tae-jin gave his orders in clipped Korean, each word a death sentence. They moved as one fluid organism, trained in the efficiency that made Korean organized crime legendary. The assault on Park's stronghold was surgical. Suppressed gunfire punctuated the pre-dawn silence as Lee Tae-jin's men swept through the compound with mechanical precision. No chaos, no screaming, just the systematic elimination of every obstacle between him and Amelia, executed with the cold revenge protocols his culture had perfected over centuries. Park's guards fell in rapid succession, their surprised expressions frozen in the moment they realized they'd underestimated Lee Tae-jin's capacity for absolute violence. He found her in the basement storage room, wrists zip-tied to a metal pipe, blood crusted at her temple. The controlled formality that defined him, the carefully maintained distance, the measured Korean politeness, shattered completely. He dropped to his knees beside her, hands shaking as he cut her restraints, his controlled exterior dissolving into something raw and desperate. "Amelia," he whispered, the Korean endearment spilling out unbidden. "Gwenchana, Gwenchana." His fingers traced her injuries with a gentleness that contradicted the violence still echoing through the building above them. She'd never seen him like this, vulnerable, his perfect composure stripped away, speaking only in his native tongue as if English had abandoned him entirely. His hands cupped her face, checking for additional injuries with frantic precision, his eyes wild with an emotion he'd never permitted her to witness. "I thought I lost you," he said finally in English, the words breaking. "Nalijima," she whispered back in hesitant Korean, the phrase he'd taught her weeks ago during one of their rare, unguarded moments. "Don't lose me." Something shifted in his expression, recognition, relief, something deeper than either. He pulled her against his chest with a fierceness that transcended cultural boundaries, his carefully constructed walls demolished completely. Above them, gunfire ceased. The war had begun. But in that moment, holding her in the aftermath of violence, Lee Tae-jin felt something more dangerous than any territorial conflict, the terrifying realization that she'd become the one vulnerability he couldn't afford and absolutely wouldn't surrender. The traditional Korean criminal justice system moved swiftly and silently. Park Jae-sung's body was discovered in a shipping container at Incheon Port, his death attributed to a business dispute that would never see the inside of a courtroom. The old ways still governed certain transactions in Seoul's underworld, and the Lee family's patriarch had called in debts that stretched back 3 generations. Seo Yoon-hee appeared at Lee Tae-jin's office 2 days later, dressed in traditional hanbok, her composure perfect. She bowed deeply, not in defeat, but in acknowledgement. "I see now what I refused to see before," she said in Korean. "She loves you in a way I never could, not because I'm incapable, but because you never wanted my love." She straightened, meeting his eyes. "I withdraw my claim. May you find peace together." She left without waiting for response, her silk skirts whispering against the floor. The organization fractured predictably. Some members pledged loyalty to Lee Tae-jin, recognizing strength when they saw it. Others simply vanished into Seoul's anonymous sprawl, unwilling to choose sides in what had become too personal, too messy. But Amelia saw the guilt eating him alive. "I should never have brought a foreign woman into this darkness," Lee Tae-jin said, staring out at the Han River from his penthouse. "You could have been killed. You were tortured because of me. "Stop," Amelia said, her voice sharp. She crossed the room, still moving carefully because of her healing ribs. "Too late for that. I chose this. I chose you, and I'm not leaving Korea. You don't understand what you're saying. The scandal alone. I understand perfectly. Your world tried to break me and failed. I'm not some delicate thing that shatters at the first real test." The real test came 3 days later at the Lee family estate in Gangnam. His parents sat across from them in the formal receiving room, his mother's face carved from ice, his father's expression unreadable. The negotiation lasted 4 hours, conducted entirely in Korean, with Amelia understanding perhaps a third of it. His mother finally spoke in English. "You realize what this means. No proper Korean woman will accept you now. Our family's reputation is built on worse things than love." Lee Tae-jin interrupted in Korean. A long silence, then his father nodded once, grudging. "You have always been stubborn. At least she has courage." It wasn't acceptance, it was tolerance. But in traditional Korean family dynamics, tolerance was the first step toward something that might eventually resemble approval. That night, holding each other in the darkness, Amelia whispered, "No going back now." "No going back," Lee Tae-jin agreed. "Only forward. Together." Outside, Seoul glittered with 10 million lights, beautiful and dangerous and home. 6 months after the press conference that changed everything, Lee Tae-jin stood in the gleaming lobby of what had once been a shuttered warehouse in Itaewon. Now it housed Seoul's most ambitious business incubator, one focused exclusively on immigrant entrepreneurs who'd been overlooked by traditional Korean venture capital. The walls displayed success stories in multiple languages. A Vietnamese woman's food tech startup, a Nigerian man's sustainable fashion line, a Brazilian family's language education platform. But it was the framed photograph near the entrance that made Tae-jin pause every morning. Amelia cutting the ribbon at the grand opening, her smile radiant as she addressed the crowd in fluent Korean peppered with Spanish phrases that made the Latino entrepreneurs in attendance weep with recognition. "You showed me we could bridge worlds," he'd told her that day, his voice thick with emotion he no longer tried to hide. She'd squeezed his hand, her American directness softening into something deeper. "We did this, together, across every boundary that tried to keep us apart." The program exceeded every projection. By their second anniversary, 50 immigrant-owned businesses had received funding, mentorship, and the kind of legitimacy that Tae-jin's name still carried despite, or perhaps because of, his past. He'd leveraged every connection, called in every favor, transformed his criminal network into something that actually built instead of destroyed. The irony wasn't lost on him that redemption required the same ruthless determination that damnation once had. They never spoke of the kidnapping. Not directly, but Amelia still flinched at sudden movements sometimes, and Tae-jin still woke at 3 a.m. reaching for her, terrified she'd vanished. Trauma didn't disappear just because love rewrote the ending. It lived in the careful way he always told her where he was going, and how she kept her phone charged obsessively in the therapy sessions they both attended without shame. Their partnership solidified into something neither had words for: business empire, personal intimacy, and cultural bridge building all woven together until the threads were indistinguishable. Amelia maintained her Mexican-American identity fiercely, her apartment filled with Frida Kahlo prints and the smell of her abuela's mole recipe, even as she navigated Korean business culture with increasing sophistication. She didn't become Korean. She didn't stop being American. She simply became herself in a place that had learned to make room for all of her. Seoul became home, not despite her foreignness, but including it, celebrating it, building space for it in ways the city hadn't before. And when Tae-jin watched her laugh with a Guatemalan entrepreneur about the universal struggle of explaining your grandmother's cooking to venture capitalists, he understood that redemption wasn't about erasing the past. It was about building something so beautiful from its ashes that the fire almost seemed worth surviving. 2 years had transformed everything. Amelia stood at 28 in their shared office at Taeyong Industries, no longer the terrified girl who'd been dragged across borders, but an equal partner who reviewed immigrant business applications with the same fierce precision Lee Tae-jin brought to his empire. She'd earned her place through intelligence that matched his ambition, through compassion that softened his edges without dulling them. The Seoul skyline blazed gold through floor-to-ceiling windows as Lee Tae-jin entered, his usual commanding stride slowing to something almost hesitant. Amelia looked up from her desk, catching the uncharacteristic nervousness in his expression. "Remember when I told you your skirt was too provocative?" His voice carried that familiar authority, but underneath ran a current of vulnerability she'd never heard before. She smiled despite herself, remembering that first humiliating day. "How could I forget?" "I was wrong." He moved closer, and she saw his hands trembling slightly. "Everything about you was perfect, is perfect. Your fire, your strength, your refusal to break even when I tried to crush you. You changed everything, my empire, my family, my heart." Then Lee Tae-jin, who'd never bowed to anyone, dropped to one knee Western style. The gesture stunned her into stillness, but he wasn't finished. Rising briefly, he performed the traditional Korean proposal, the deep, respectful bow that honored both her and their shared future. "Marry me." His dark eyes held hers with absolute certainty. "In both our worlds. Let me spend my life earning the forgiveness you've already given me." Tears blurred her vision as 2 years of redemption, partnership, and impossible love crystallized into this single moment. "Yes. Nay. Si." She pulled him up, her voice breaking with joy. "In every language. Always yes." He slipped 2 rings onto her finger, a Western diamond that caught the fading sunlight and a traditional Korean gold band passed down through generations of Lee family women. The weight of both felt right, felt perfect. Their kiss tasted like triumph and tears, like crossing borders and building bridges. Behind them, Seoul's skyline glowed with promise as the city that had witnessed her captivity now bore witness to her choice. Later, she held the wedding invitation they'd designed together, 3 languages flowing across elegant paper. Korean characters spoke of honor and family. English words promised partnership and love. Spanish phrases carried warmth and heritage. At the bottom, a simple phrase repeated 3 times. "I love you. Saranghae. Te amo." Amelia traced the words with her finger, marveling at the journey from victim to victor, from captive to equal. Their story hadn't erased the darkness of its beginning, but it had transformed pain into purpose, obsession into devotion, cultural collision into beautiful union. A new chapter was beginning, one written in 3 languages, built on redemption and promising a legacy that would span borders, heal wounds, and prove that even the most broken beginnings could become extraordinary endings. Thank you for sticking around with me. My wonderful story family. Before you go, I'd love to ask you for a small favor. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel. It helps me more than you can imagine and keeps these videos coming. The link is right below the video. Drop your location below. I want to know where my story family is watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it.